Hey, this is Harold Goldberg, the president of the New York Video Game Critics Circle and founder of the New York Game Awards and critic for the New York Times. So, the reason we're here today, this is an exciting moment for me because we have as a guest Megaran. And I'm going to just I can't even express to you how cool it is to have Megaran. We also have Ronald Gordon with us, our senior writer. He'll be asking a lot of questions. But Raheem Jarbo is not a jack of all trades, master of none. He's master of all the trades. And his book is really compelling. I've just gotten in a few chapters. It's been out for a while, but it's called Dream Master: From the Stoop to the Stage to the Stars. And there's something I want to ask about that, but I just want to tell you, if you don't know, Raheem is a hip hop master. Like, he's a nerdcore transmitter of game word lore. That's how I see it, man. And he can take any audience and capture them. So I happen to be up in the mountains right now, and not far from me, Raheem did a performance a few weeks ago, maybe a month now, and he had everyone in the palm of his hands. And I would say that maybe a handful of that audience knew who you were, but you had them, man, and it didn't take long. It was immediate. Megaran will be in Brooklyn at Zone 1 on July 16th. You can give me the full name of the club. I kind of screwed it up, but it'll be an awesome place. It's going to be sold out, so get your tickets. And Megaran is also a record producer. He makes games. His hip hop sometimes centers on Final Fantasy VII, which he loves so much. And early on, Mega Man, he still loves Mega Man. He talks about Mega Man at his gigs. And his kids record called Buddy's Magic Toy Box debuted at number 2 on the Billboard Kids charts. And he's an educator as well. So at the New York Video Game Critics Circle, we teach kids to write reviews and narrative using games. So we go into underserved areas. Sometimes we're in homeless shelters, places for the unhoused. And we find these great gems of undiscovered talent there. One of them was Makita Byfield. So Makita was in a shelter in the Bronx, and she was so animated and so smart that we made her an intern right away, I think before the class was over. So it's a 10-week class, but Makita she was ready. So, and then she helped us co-host our New York Game Awards. So I think what I'm leading to, Raheem, is that the talent out there is undiscovered, and folks need a chance. And I want to get into your origin story, but let's talk about the education aspect first, and how you're involved as an educator and how that impacts what you write as well.
Oh, man. Well, first, thanks for that amazing intro. I felt like, man, I was like, who's he talking about? Because that didn't sound like, anything I see myself as. So I really appreciate that. I think, hip hop, education, video games have been such a big part of my life for as long as I can remember. And they've always kind of interweaved one way or another. Even when, I feel like outside forces kind of told me that these were things that completely needed to be separated, that did not work together in any way. Growing up, you don't think education and video games. You don't think hip hop and education. You don't think hip hop and video games. So any sort of combination, a cross section of any of these things just didn't seem to be a thing that would work out, growing up in the 80s and 90s. But for as far as my story, I'm from Philadelphia, born and raised in a part of town called West Oak Lane, which is maybe in the northwest side of Philadelphia. And man, video games were always my life. It became so early on, it became apparent that this was something that was kind of a welcome, healthy distraction from some of the things that were going on around the neighborhood. If I wasn't as athletically challenged as the rest of the kids, this was something that I could, a field I could compete on. We were kind of a group of video game nerds on my block that would help the cooler kids, past levels that they would get stuck on and things like that. They'd be like, oh, that's the video game nerds, and I was like, all right, man, I know how to beat Mike Tyson. Let me show you, things like that. And so that was a bit of kind of a door opening for me, socially, to be able to get to know people and, kind of show my stuff. And but yeah, education was something that very early on, my mother was always, harping on and pressing on, like, get that education, do those things that can never be taken away from you. So, get your degree and learn how to, make the most of that. So I went to Penn State University. I was an African-American studies and English major. And maybe halfway through my schooling, my sociology professor told me about Teach for America, or back then they had a subsidiary called Teach Philadelphia, where basically they would take people who were interested in teaching and kind of throw you straight to the fire. You would go into the wolves, the lion's den. You were in a high poverty, very challenging area of the city, and in the most needed areas, so we wind up in middle school. So I taught middle school, which is, probably the toughest age to teach. But I feel like if you can make it there, you can do anything. When I called my high school teachers for support, advice, they were like, oh, I would never do middle school. Like, no, that was the advice they gave me, is like to get out and find my way to high school. But I felt like high school was a bit more challenging for me because I was still young. I didn't look much different from a high schooler at that time. So I felt like I needed some sort of separation. So middle school was where I went to school in North Philadelphia and kind of cut my teeth learning the ropes. Luckily had some amazing mentors that helped me to really push through. But eventually, I never gave up my love for video games, my love for comic books, nerdy things, as well as for music and hip hop. So I would try to incorporate those things in class whenever I could. And that kind of set me apart from most of my counterparts. And they were like, oh, this is the cool teacher who's going to tell us about rap music and tell us about, video games and things like that. So that allowed me to get a really cool rapport with my students. And all the while I was making music on the side, just doing my thing, going out, playing open mics, playing video games at home, learning programming, coding, things like that. And eventually I created an album, the Final Fantasy Project, that I think kind of took me away from the classroom on a more extended basis, where I started being asked to play gigs at conventions and then on to more traditional venues and spaces like, like elsewhere where we're playing in New York City. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a very fun journey, I'd say, but education is at the root of it all. Like it's really where it all started for me. And it's something I return to as much as I can. I do a lot of mentoring. Now with the children's album, I'm in libraries, I'm in community centers. I'm able to get in front of youth as much as possible, because I really feel like that energy is what helps me to keep creating and trying to innovate, is that youthful energy.
We're talking about education, and I immediately thought of a challenge I had, and I was also with our mentor Isaac Espinoza down on the Lower East Side, where I live at the Henry Street settlement, and we had a pair of twins who were probably first year high school students, and they wouldn't talk the whole time there. They just sat there and were playing video. They would play, but they wouldn't talk. And so it finally came to the last class, or second to last class. And I said, the thing about this class is you got to write something. We are journalists and writers, so you have to write something. And Ronald, you were there as well at that class. And I said, I will take down what you are saying. Just talk to me. So one still wouldn't talk, but one did. And he wrote this beautiful essay about modern warfare and how he and his mom played modern warfare on the day his father left. And so they would play a level and then they would start crying that dad had left, and they'd play another level and start crying again. But they were together, mother and son. And it ended up being one of our best essays. So I wanted to ask you, like, are there any kids that you remember that you had a breakthrough with?
Oh yeah, there's probably every year there was a kid. I mean, I remember when I first moved to Arizona, there's a child, Henry, who they all, every teacher was like, oh boy, you got to watch out for Henry. He's not going to participate. He's not going to want to do this. He doesn't like to read. He doesn't like to be, called out. He doesn't like to be disciplined, and, and instantly Henry and I, bonded, and it was over, I believe it was over like a song or something like that. He mentioned something and then I mentioned, oh man, I know about that. That was when this happened and this, and he's like, what, and then later on video games, and I believe it maybe was Call of Duty and things like that, where I said something and he's like, what do you know about that? And I'm like, come on, dude. Like, I understand. And a lot of the teachers would come to me like, what, how did you get Henry to like, to pay attention, And I'm like, I just listened to him, and that's really what it came down to, is like the things he would say, I made mental notes of them. And so I could recall them. I could bring it back to him. If I didn't understand something, I would go and research it, and, I went from a kid who just, hated math. And then by the end of the year was, excited to show what he knew, excited to run to the board to answer a question during the morning warm-ups and things like that. So every year, I think I would find, those situations, because they say as a teacher, you remember the problem kids first. Like that's the first name you're going to remember. It's the name you have to call all the time to sit down, things like that. And I use that as a challenge in the reverse way to be like, well, this is the kid that I'm going to create a bond with first, and so therefore it's just taking the time to listen, and to interact and react. And so, I think that almost every school year I've had multiple students where I was able to see a real-time breakthrough. And that's why I always say education is the number one most rewarding thing you can possibly do, because seeing real-time results with a child who people, kind of write off as hopeless, and then to be able to see that child make a really significant change in their attitude and enthusiasm, just from someone just giving them a little more time is, there's really no career that can give you that type of feeling. Maybe performing on stage, you can turn a crowd. You mentioned the Fleischman show and things like that, where I love walking into an audience that doesn't know who I am, doesn't know what I'm going to do. And in 5 minutes, they're sitting down, they're standing up, they're putting their hands up and, and singing along, and things like that. So that's really the only vocation that has given me that same kind of feeling as education. And it's been, performing for sure.
Raheem, early in your book, you say there isn't a moment in your life that you can't really relate to playing video games. You remember video games and, high and low moments of your personal experience. And I said, that really hit me as something I understand. But give me a couple of moments during your early life as when video games were as important as a cool experience or a bad experience or whatever.
Oh my goodness, man! Final Fantasy VII. I don't have to go any further than that, really. Final Fantasy VII is and it's a game that I've played, bought, rebought, replayed so many times that it's got multiple like flashpoints in my memory. But the very first time my friend Stan brought his PlayStation to our house, just to kind of show me, because at that time I was a Super Nintendo guy. I still feel like Super Nintendo is the greatest system of all time. I'd be wearing the hat, and I've just never thought that anything would ever be better than that. And so he's like, but you got to play this Final Fantasy VII. And I'm like, whatever, dude. Brings the PlayStation over and we start playing through it. I'm like, oh, this is okay. And then when I saw a summon for the first time and things like that, and the story just got me into it so quickly. And I was just like, wow, I think my mind's blown, like I have to get this game. Like I got to figure out a way. So it's fast forward, I start bundling all of my games together to take them to Funko Land to create some sort of trade value where I could somehow get my hands on a PlayStation, and they took like everything for me to get it. But yeah, it was something where I was like, I didn't think that, that anything could open my mind in that way. And so, fast forward, there's been Mass Effect later on did the same thing for me. Batman, Arkham, those games have done the same for me, where they've just expanded the thought and the idea of what games could be. The first BioShock for me is in that same boat, where so many of these games have completely changed my idea of what video games could be, and it just comes from great story, great characters, graphical, innovations for sure. But I think just a story that grabs you, and that you can sort of like see yourself in a little bit in these characters.
I need the story too, man. If there's not if there's not a good story, man, I can't do it. I mean, I remember.
Yeah. Like we talk about the Call of Duty games, and sometimes I'm like, I don't care. I just want to shoot. Like, I'm just like, all right, I'm going to skip everything here because this isn't that important.
I mean, we could devote a whole podcast to Seven, or we could devote a whole podcast or multiple podcasts to BioShock, because I thought Ken Levine was inspired for that first one.
Yeah.
But, before we go for an ad break, I just wanted to say that Final Fantasy VII was the first trip I took to write about a game. So they sent us, I was writing for Wired, and they sent us to Hawaii to meet Mr. Sakaguchi. And I didn't know what I was in for, because I had not been playing much Final Fantasy before that. But I was just hooked. They put us in a room, and they had a translator, and you could just see that guy's eyes light up, Sakaguchi, as he was talking about like what was arguably his masterwork. And I was like, how do you get all those cutscenes into one PlayStation, man? It was awesome. But we're going to be back with Megaran right after this ad break, and Ronald Gordon's going to take over for a while.
The Playing with Purpose podcast is brought to you by the New York Video Game Critics Circle. The New York Video Game Critics Circle is a nonprofit organization that brings comprehensive games journalism and games narrative classes direct to schools in underserved communities across New York City. Students are given unique opportunities like writing game reviews for nygamecritics.com, creating games with Twine, and conducting interviews with gamers and game industry icons, like this very episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to go to nygamecritics.com to learn more, and head on over to nygamecritics.com/donate to donate to this incredible cause. And now, back to the show.
So we're back with the master, Megaran, and our own senior writer master, Ronald Gordon, is going to ask a few questions. I may jump in occasionally, but Ronald, why don't you go ahead, man?
Yeah, totally. So I just want to say, happy to have you here. Since first hearing about this, I was personally really excited because I'm a huge fan of Nerdcore, and I do remember you being in the Pokemon Rival Cypher. That was really good, I believe, by Cam Steady. That one was awesome. You were great as Gary. So speaking just on Nerdcore, the first question I wanted to ask is, how do you feel about the community and its recent growth?
Oh man, it's been amazing to see, especially, as a guy who's been around since I guess pretty much right after it began. I feel like if you break it down into kind of generations, I feel like maybe I'm like second gen or something. I feel like MC Frontalot coins the term maybe in early aughts, and making songs for Song Fight, Penny Arcade, things like that. And then MC Lars, MC Chris, and then probably me somewhere after that. And then so to see this go from where it is now, I mean, since then, there's probably 7 or 8 generations of kids that have just come and taken it further and further, it's been really awesome to see, So on top of that, though, there's these events every year that started with an event called Nerdapalooza, where like nerdcore video game musicians would all get together. And the New York scene is a huge chiptune, movement as well. So a lot of these guys would get together, have events. A lot of it all started on online forums, but there's always been a great community aspect to this. The people who create it have always been super supportive, collaborative, working together, helping each other out, answering questions. And so that has never changed. And I feel like that's the most awesome part of it, is that despite its growth, I mean, we're now at the point where nerdcore musicians are able to make a living kind of doing this, sometimes without the more traditional means, without touring, without dropping albums, or whatever, but just from creating and dropping music on YouTube and things like that. But we've seen such a community that continues to grow, despite the medium changing. It went from online forums to Discord servers now, but there's just still so much support within the community, and so you mentioned the Cypher, and I feel like the advent of that, the Cypher, which is where a lot of artists get together, we play a bunch of different roles of characters we love, and just all go at it at once. And then that allows someone who's a fan of the original artist to find new artists that they love, so it's been it's a very integral part of the process of people building their names, building a reputation, building good quality music and fan bases. So yeah, the community aspect of it has never gone away. And that's what I love most about it, more so than in any other genre. I think it's so community based, so DIY, that we're all willing to share. We're willing to talk, we're willing to encourage each other. And I don't really see that changing. So that to me has been a really great through line in nerdcore.
Yeah, that's great to hear. What are some of your best experiences in the nerdcore community? Because I know there's big shows always out there. There's always little meetups as well that happen. I believe it was Game Boy Jones who did like a whole song related to One Piece, but it also had at the end a bunch of pictures he took with tons of different creators that he met IRL at a thing, and it was a really wholesome thing. So yeah, just what are some of your favorite experiences being a part of this?
Man, I think just being able to put faces to a lot of the names, in the community. There's folks that I've worked with that I, maybe thought I was never going to meet. They all lived in different countries, things like that. And then having like real IRL meetups, like the Nerdcore Party Con, which is coming up later on this month. Different conventions. There's MomoCon, and they do a big nerd rap takeover there. PAX as well. There's always been opportunities to meet and connect with people. MagFest is probably my favorite event. Happens at the top of the year, where we're able to get so many musicians together and all these different like subcultures of nerd music. So it's not just, rappers, but also composers, also chiptune artists, singers, dancers, DJs. You get everybody in one place, so you all get to learn from each other, which I think is dope. But I'm much more of an in-person kind of guy, so I always enjoy those moments, my favorite. So last year I went to the Nerdcore Party Con for the first time, and it was just amazing. There's this venue in North Carolina that holds maybe 300-400 people, and it's just packed to the gills from start to finish. Every performer, no one leaves. Everyone's there to see everything. And then on the last day, there was a giant meet and greet. So they opened the venue up again, and every artist is down on the floor, and lines form, and everybody gets to talk to everybody. And it was 4 or 5 hours straight of just chatting, hugging, taking selfies, and just really having a good time and meeting the people who really helped to keep this thing going. So again, it just all comes back to community. But I think those are my favorite moments, when I'm able to see the folks in person, and most importantly, I think when they're just as cool kind of IRL as they are, in emails and DMs. So yeah, I enjoy that.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. The Nordcore community is like one of the only, I feel like, music communities that feels more down to earth than like actual celebrities, because at the end of the day, we're all nerds, and you can just as easily find this on the street as you can anybody else. So I think that's pretty wholesome. My next question, leading into conventions, is you being at NPC, or Nerdy People of Color. How has that been? That's studying you and like doing research has been the first time I've heard of NPC. So yeah, what's it been like?
Oh man, it's been cool. The NPC. It's funny that NPC is Nerdy People of Color, but it also is Nerdcore PartyCon.
Yeah.
So this acronym is in two places at once, but very connected. So maybe in 2013 or 14, when I was going to conventions a lot, we would just notice that we were kind of the only people of color there, and then I was with a friend of mine who didn't really feel very welcome. Like, he was saying like, man, I'd never come to these conventions because I didn't feel like there was anything for me in these places. We're at a time where I feel like just a small example, but like cosplay, when people of color do cosplay, and how the comments are always, not always, but I think more so back in those days, very unkind.
Yeah.
Where they'd be like, oh, it's a black Goku. What is this? Or things like that, where people would get ridiculously stupid about someone of another race playing a character that isn't their race, so things like that would happen a lot. And so my friends were like, man, this is why I don't really feel comfortable in these spaces. Like, I feel like these people aren't necessarily appreciative of, whatever I'm doing, and they're not going to like it. They're not going to understand it. They're going to kind of make fun of it. And so, but I would meet up with the same 4 or 5 people, that were of all different backgrounds and races, and at different conventions. And we're like, man, like, we're like the crew that always meets up at these shows, but we want to encourage the rest of our friends who don't necessarily feel welcome to come. So that was where the NPC came from. We were like, yes, we're going to be at these cons. We're going to be loud and proud and exactly who we are. We're going to be Black. We're going to be Asian. We're going to be queer. We're going to be whoever we are. And it's not necessarily a place where we felt comfortable, but I feel like we're going to make this space comfortable, because that's what it's supposed to be about, is inclusion. So letting people know that it can be cool. It can be fun to be different in these spaces. And so then I would meet friends that were wrestlers, friends that were pro athletes, friends that were professional musicians, that were all nerds who also wanted to come to these events. So I was like, oh, well, we need to all join up, because I think people in these like desirable positions and, walks of life need to let people know as well that they're nerds and they're proud of it, So Xavier Woods, a WWE wrestler, another friend of mine that plays professional football, who now is a professional wrestler, so being not so afraid of speaking about what you love is really what led to the NPC, and just being like, man, we can be loud and proud, and it's okay, in these spaces. Like, this is a safe space. And that's really what it was about, was just kind of fostering a safe space for people of color.
I just wanted to jump in, Ronald and Raheem, to jump to the lineup that was just in Europe, right? So you just came back from a really successful European tour, and I just wondered if you can run us through some of the highlights of that, and who was on the bill, and I would see your clips on Instagram. It's like, whoa, there's so many people at these events. So can you talk to us a little bit about how that came about? Who's on the bill? What some of your favorite gigs were, that sort of thing.
Oh man, yeah, I just came back from Europe and the UK with Wheatus. Wheatus is a band that has been around for almost 25 years. Created a song called Teenage Dirtbag, which is kind of like the song of of all of our lives and generations. It really speaks to the nerd who, needs a happy ending, in life that gets kicked and beat up on. So yeah, that's, man, Brendan Brown, the lead singer of Wheatus, just happens to be a big nerdcore fan. And, he's like, man, I grew up in New York. I always was, I loved hip hop, but also loved Iron Maiden. And I also, was really into like so many different styles of music. And now that we have a platform and a voice, like we want to do our best to bring our fans into a different world, and I think that's really the job of like the best, headliners. I think, you don't necessarily need to bring a band that sounds like you to open. You bring something different so that people can get something different. And so, yeah, Brendan was like, dude, what are you doing? I'd love to bring you out on tour. And I'm like, what? And I had never heard of most of the countries we were going to. I mean, it was Breda, Netherlands, and Wasquehal, France, and, just really small, unknown cities, and then Liverpool.
Yeah.
And I was just like, all right, well, cool, let's do it. And so we get out there, and it's just like these huge crowds of people, and not only just like fans, but fans who want to see something new. So fans that would talk to me before the show and say, hey man, I saw you were on the bill, so I looked you up. I really love that song you did about this anime that I love, or man, I love Final Fantasy 7 too, just like you did, and so being able to talk to people in other countries about these things were amazing. So not to mention the crowds were awesome, big crowds. And during one trip on the bus, Brendan told us about their first tour, and I forget who he's opening for. I think he said like Yellow Card or something. And so he said when they were opening, they were kids that would push their way to the front for their performance. And they would think, oh, these kids are coming to see us. And they would come to the front, and then they would turn their backs to the show.
Oh.
And be the entire front row would just turn their backs, and they would turn their backs and put up their middle fingers the entire set, and just be in the front 4, 5, 6 rows, just to let you know, like, I don't like you. I don't want to like you. I don't want to know you. Get out of the way. I want the band that I want, And so, and he said, man, like from there, I knew like this was not the kind of audience I wanted to foster if we ever, were able to make something of this, And so I'm able to learn something every day. I always feel like every day is a school day, because literally every day on this earth, you get a moment to learn something. And so watching a band who's been multi-platinum, been around the world 100 times, and watch them reach out to smaller acts because they love them, because they're fans of them, and because they want their fans to open their mind to them, really taught me a lot, man. And so, it changes the way I look at things. A lot of folks will just be like, whoa, let me see how many Instagram followers they have. And, oh, let me see how many, TikTok followers they have. No, and they're not about any of that. It's just about, is this good? And do I think this is something that my fans would enjoy? Yes. And so they've been able to foster a really amazing group of supporters that, are now hopefully going to be fans of me. So, yeah, it was a great time, and I've learned so much from it. And, Europe was awesome, and I forget to take pictures a lot. So I kept having to remind myself like, oh man, this is such a moment. You got to take a picture, like get on stage to see this. You got to take a picture. Like we were at Download Festival, and I mean, I feel like there was maybe 10,000 people in that crowd. Like it was just the most people I'd ever seen at one time under a tent, and just singing every single word of their songs, so it was a beautiful moment to be a part of.
Were you nervous at all, or are you beyond that now?
Nah, insurgents, not a bit nervous. That's one of my lines. No, actually, you know what? Yes, I was nervous because, it's a new audience. It's a new thing. It's a new place. It's a new country. So I was worried they're not going to speak English, or they're not going to be able to understand these fast, rapidy raps, that I'm doing. So, to try to make up for that, I would play with a video camera, or like a video screen behind me, and I would make videos to go with each song that had my lyrics on screen, just in case they, would miss something I say or something, or when I tell a joke, like it should kind of hit, a certain way. And in each city, I would take the time to learn a few colloquial phrases, like in French or in some other language. So I was doing my best to pick those up and to try to make things comfortable. And they appreciate that, when you take the time to learn a few phrases and things, like those go a long way. So, I I was nervous. Also, like when they give you a set time when you're the opener, it's not like play as long as you want. It's like you have 28 minutes and don't go over.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, man, I have like 100 songs that I really love and maybe a top 10 on Spotify that I really love. But 28 minutes is like 5 of those. So now you got to whittle it down to how are people going to get to know Mega Ran in 5 songs? So to me, that was the nerve wracking part. It's just like, man, what if I pick the wrong song? Somebody afterwards is going to say, well, why didn't you play the Final Fantasy song? And I was like, well, I didn't think this crowd of 600 all would understand Final Fantasy. So I tried to play something a little more universal, you know, and they're like, what I love Final Fantasy, you know? So it's a really tough thing, man. Like that was the most nerve wracking, like picking a set to me, you know. Thankfully, luckily, you know, it's been a while since I've been an opening act. So as a headliner, you just play whatever you want. You do whatever you want, you know? And so having to bring myself back to opening acts, you know, like play your songs and get the heck out of there, you know, kind of a mentality, was a real big change for me. And, but it was important. So I think I did well.
Yeah.
But I was super nervous. I'm like, I'm going to pick the wrong songs, or I'm going to play a song that I don't know. I'm going to mess it up. You know, they're not going to like me. You know, I got really nervous about that. But first few shows, it was easy after that.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Speaking of just in that, you talked about how you picked up colloquial phrases and things like that, and it's just the long list of your skill set. It makes me wonder: is there anything that you have yet to like learn or do that is on your bucket list?
Good question. One thing I haven't done yet is voice acting. You know, I really want to get into voice acting. I feel like I'm pretty good with voices, but I've never like sat down and created a demo reel and really grinded my way to like try to get a voice acting gig, you know. But I get a lot of people who say stuff like, "Ah, man, you're Mega Ran. You probably don't even have to, you know, go through the rigmarole of other people. You may not even have to audition or do demo tapes. You're Mega Ran." And I'm like, no, like that's not the kind of gig I want. I want to be able to work for it. I want to be able to earn it and pay my dues. You know, I feel like it's super important to know that you're good enough to do something the right way. You know, like, yes, I've put in a lot of work before in different fields, and maybe that would give me some sort of advantage. But at the end of the day, you have to be good at a thing to be able to keep doing it. So voice acting is something I want to do. So if I get some time, honestly, I want to sit down. I want to make a really good demo reel, show my range of characters, and hopefully get into some either some video games voice acting or some cartoons or something. You know, I would love to voice act. And that's the one thing that I haven't tackled yet. I haven't mastered because I haven't given it really any effort. So that's something that I want to do at some point.
We could see you in any number of series, man. I could see you in Judas, the upcoming Ken Levine game that everyone's looking forward to, man.
Oh man, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Man, I would love that. So, you know, I think it's just a matter of time. You know, you start looking at games, and the more you learn about them, you're like, oh man, this guy is in every game. You know, like how does Troy Baker get every gig? You know, like how does this person get every gig? You know, and you're like, well, they put in some time and they knock it out of the park when they get opportunities. Yeah. So I never see a situation where someone comes up in every game or in a ton of bookings, but isn't good, you know? So I do think you gotta execute, you know what I'm saying? So it'll take me some time to really sit down and learn it. But I've been talking to some people. I have some friends that are voice actors, and they've given me the tools. I just need to make the time to make it a bigger part of my goal list.
Nice.
It's very fair. Yeah. Well, I'd say you pretty much already have a voice for it, seeing as how you are the one of the few people behind the Xpod 97, your entire X-Men 97 podcast, which you have been rigorously uploading. How has I know the series itself. I've seen a couple clips of it, and me and my friends are planning to like sit down and fully watch it one day. But it's invigorating. I can't imagine the deep dives you've been taking in that in the podcasts.
Yeah, it's fun, especially when like we're specifically talking about one show, so it's not like we're doing a Marvel podcast or an X-Men in general podcast. It's just about X-Men 97, which has 10 episodes and that's it, so how do you continue to make content fresh around that is a challenge that we're up to. I think just like finding really cool things we like about it. We're doing our first live podcast this next weekend at BlurredCon. Looking forward to that. We're going to do like a big X-Men fan meetup, maybe some cosplay, who knows? But I'm really looking forward to that. So just being able to reach the people, that are as excited about it as me, but the show's been amazing. So it's always easy when the source material is great. The hard part is like writing a song about something that really isn't that good, or trying to create content around something that isn't good or you don't enjoy it, and I talked to Rustage the other day at the end of my tour. Rustage is probably one of the biggest nerdcore rappers, and he was hanging out with me in Glasgow. We went to a wrestling show together, and I was just like, man, how do you do this? Like, he does music, he does a D&D live stream show, he's making his own card game, and I'm like, how do you do all these things? And he's like, oh, it's easy. I only do what's fun to me. And I was like, what is this fun you speak of? Like, and he's like, yeah, like the moment any of this isn't fun, I'm just not going to do it. And I'm like, dang, that's good. And I found myself caught in situations where I felt stuck, where I wasn't, maybe the first 5 times I did it was fun. And then on the 6th or 7th, I'm like, I'm kind of like not having it fun, but I'm doing it because people are expecting me to do it. And it was really cool to hear a person who's super successful say that, where he was just like, if it's not fun, I just won't do it. And it's like, oh, well, it's easy for you to say, but it's not, like it's not easy to say. Like there's still going to be people who want that thing from you. And it takes a lot to be able to say like, I'm not enjoying this, so I'm not going to do it. So putting your emphasis and your time and your energy into things that you enjoy is a great luxury to have. And I think it helps to make sure that everything you make is good, like you're not forcing yourself.
I've been thinking a lot about the idea of creative tension lately. And we just finished watching The Bear, which is I think everyone knows what The Bear is, but it's a show about a restaurant. And this season the editing was such that every second was about tension. And I'm reading this book called Swan Dive about a New York City ballet dancer who, and she is talking about the tension involved just before you dance. Right. That once you're dancing, and I imagine it's like this with performing as well, you're kind of in it. But leading up to it, there are thoughts about like, oh, I could fall or I could not remember lyrics. I think that's a good thing. I get very nervous every time I write anything, and then until I'm in it. But thinking about it is like, makes me take omeprazole or something like that. I gotta calm my stomach down. How do you deal with creative tension, man?
Man, I think taking a break is always good for me. Yeah. Anytime that I feel like I'm almost overwhelmed, I'm glad I can take a break. I have a kid, a wife. We can take family time. We can take a moment and step away. But the tension is kind of a necessary part of it sometimes, So I think using it to your advantage is great. I try not to put so much pressure on myself. I feel like now I've been able to just kind of separate work time from playtime and things like that. And so now I go to the studio once a week. So it's Wednesday, it's a 4 or 5 hour session, and that's the only time. So I can set it and forget it. I think of things while I'm driving to the studio that become the next song I write. you know. But I'm able to leave it all there. If when I was recording, it's just, during the pandemic, I was stuck at home. The tension would kind of get the best of me there, where it's like you wake up, you turn over and you see all the things you create with, and you're like, okay, here we go, and it became really difficult. But yeah, the tension is so necessary. But it's just a matter of, I guess, like a rubber band, you got to pull back and let go, because that moment is going to propel you forward, so embracing the tension, kind of leaning into the tension, for me is what helps me to create, so now I have to kind of, it's almost like, not that I think I'm like so good at a thing that I don't need, any assistance, but I feel like I've been doing it so long that I have to try different ways just to make myself, think differently, use different parts of my brain, so it's like the equivalent of me being like, all right, I've been writing with my right hand for a long time. Let me try the left. Let me just see what happens, or I've been writing from the front to the back for a long time. Let me start at the end and then work my way the other way. So now I'm just creating these challenges that help to bring new things out of me. It's like, man, when you perform live, you're singing a lot more. So why aren't you singing when you record it, when you write it? You find this comfort zone live that makes you try these things. So why don't you do them in your recording? So it's more or less me pushing myself and trying to lean into that tension to hopefully get something new out of it.
Thanks, man. Ronald, do you have one last question for Megaran?
Bring it.
Let's see. I usually like to end my usually like to end interviews I do off with a little silly question. So, favorite game to just turn your brain off to?
Oh, that's easy. Tetris Effect. That is an absolutely gorgeous game that is fun. I still think Tetris is probably the greatest game of all time, because it's always fun. So really any Tetris. So right now it's Tetris 99. So if I need something on the Switch to play really quickly, 2 minutes or 2 hours before bed, I'm just like, yeah, this gets my brain in a really fun place. So yes, Tetris for sure, but Tetris Effect just takes it to another level. I think with all the really cool visuals you're getting, the sound stuff, that the connectivity of it all is it's just like really fun for my brain. So Tetris for sure is the game that I will unplug on. But I stream full time too. So like if I'm not, like, I'll play something on stream, but I will never play a game on stream that's like my game. You know what I mean? So it's like, no, this is for me. I don't want the pressure of someone watching me play it and fail and screw up. So I'll never play Tetris on stream. That's just something that's just for me. But yeah, like even when I'm sitting there and I don't know what to stream, I'm like, what do I play? What do I do? But I will never play like my comfort game, on stream. I feel like that's something you got to keep to yourself. I'm actually curious about you guys. Like, I don't know, Harold, Ronald, what's your go-to game where you got to like just shut off?
Ronald, you want to go first?
Yeah, my game is entirely unconventional. It's Monster Hunter World. I have over 1,000 hours in it, and it's to that point where whenever I play it and I just want to like de-stress, I kind of like lock my brain in. This is how you use the controller. Fight monster, and I just go blank for several hours on it.
That's cool. I didn't find that game non-stressful at all. Sitting trying to fight giant beasts with a little club or something. But I really do love Monster Hunter. Yeah, those games were so fun.
I like going into Red Dead Redemption or Red Dead Redemption 2 to just chill, look around, walk around rather than ride the horse. Get to especially if I'm on the Lower East Side of New York. I love it, but it's not what you would call bucolic, And so just to hear crickets and watch a sunset in Red Dead, that's a good way for me to chill.
Nice.
We've been talking with the Dream Master, Megaran, and I'm so pleased that Raheem, you took the time to speak with us today. Mega Ran will be performing at Elsewhere Zone 1 on July 16th. You got to go, man. I'm going to go. Ronald, you going to go?
I'll be, I think, in Florida by then on family vacation. So.
Well, I'm going to go.
Oh.
So everyone go out to see Mega Ran on July 16th in Brooklyn. You're going to be glad you did it, especially if you haven't seen him before. It's a real treat. So the Critics Circle will be out at the Long Island Retro Expo in August. I believe it's August 9th and 10th. And our executive director, Ryan, and Ronald will be there. Cherise Smith, our board member, will be there. Just a lot of good people. I think the Iron Lords are going as well. So come out and see us then. We'll have more podcasts before then, obviously. But thank you so much for listening. Thanks again to Mega Ran. Thanks to Ronald. We'll see you all soon.